be the first to admit, I'm one of the most skeptical people you'll ever meet. I don't believe in ghosts. I don't believe in paranormal stuff. And honestly, if someone tells me a scary story, my first instinct is to find the logical explanation. That's just who I am. So trust me when I say, what happened to me a few weeks ago has completely destroyed that confidence. I still don't have an explanation. And honestly, I'm still a little scared. My friend Steve and his wife were planning a romantic weekend getaway for their anniversary. The problem was they have 2 kids and a dog. Usually that means one of them stays home. But this time, the stars aligned perfectly. Both kids were leaving for a school trip, so they were finally free, except for their golden retriever. I jumped at the chance to help. I love dogs. I love quiet weekends. I told Steve I'd house sit and watch the dog. No problem. He was grateful, and the plan was set. Now, Steve isn't struggling financially. He built this massive home out in the middle of nowhere because he likes his privacy. It's a beautiful place. Peaceful, secluded, a little far from everything. But I wasn't worried about that. I like the quiet. I arrived Friday afternoon. Steve had stocked the house with food and snacks like I was going to be there for a month. It was overkill, but I wasn't complaining. The dog was happy to see me, and I was happy to see him. It was going to be a good weekend. That night, the dog and I watched movies and just hung out. Around 9, Steve texted me. "Don't get scared being alone in that big house. It can get pretty spooky at night." I sent back an LOL and told him to shut up. I wasn't scared, not even a little. I went to bed around 1 in the morning with the dog curled up next to me. Then, at exactly 3:21 a.m., I was jolted awake. The dog was barking downstairs. Not a playful bark, not the kind of bark when someone knocks at the door. This was loud, aggressive, and relentless. The kind of barking that tells you something is very wrong. My heart jumped into my throat. I got out of bed and made my way downstairs, and the entire time, he didn't stop. When I finally found him in the kitchen, he was barking at the basement door. Every single hair on his back was standing straight up. His whole body was rigid. I tried calling his name, tried to calm him down. He wouldn't even look at me. When I reached for the doorknob, he completely lost it, running back and forth, spinning, barking even louder. My first thought was an intruder. Steve has a really high-end security system, so breaking in wouldn't be easy, but still, it was possible. I grabbed the biggest knife I could find in the kitchen. I took a breath. I opened the door. The dog ran to the doorway, but stopped at the frame. He stood there growling, refusing to go any further. I turned on the light and walked down. I yelled a bunch of tough-sounding stuff, trying to convince myself more than anyone else. I checked every corner, every closet, the bathroom, behind every piece of furniture. Nothing. Not a single sign of anyone being down there. The only thing I noticed was the cold. The basement was freezing. Now, basements are usually cooler, I know that. But I'd been in this basement dozens of times, and it had never been this cold. Not even close. But a cold room isn't a reason to panic. I told myself that. I went back upstairs, and eventually, after what felt like forever, the dog calmed down. We both fell asleep in the living room. The next morning, everything was completely normal. The dog was playful and happy. I even went back down to the basement during the day, and the temperature was fine. Totally normal. I almost convinced myself I had imagined how cold it was. That night, I decided to sleep on the couch, just in case. I wanted to stay near the basement door and keep an eye on things. I ended up falling asleep watching TV. And then, it happened again. Same time, same barking, same door. I stormed into the kitchen,
And this time the dog was even more frantic than the night before. He was practically vibrating. He was so terrified. I talked to him. I told him it was okay. He acted like I wasn't even there. When I grabbed the doorknob this time, instead of barking, he started to cry. This soft, heartbreaking whimper. I let go of the knob, and he barked again. I grabbed it again. The crying returned. That sound almost broke me. A dog that terrified doesn't just happen for no reason. But I went down anyway. This time it was cold again, just like before. But there was something new. A smell. I can't fully describe it other than just wrong. It was heavy and awful, and it hit me the moment I reached the bottom of the stairs.
And then I saw it. Some of the framed family photos Steve had hanging on the wall were knocked over. The bar stools in the corner were on the floor, tipped over. Nothing else was out of place. Just those things. I picked them up. I set the pictures on the bar. I wanted to get out of there as fast as possible because the smell was unbearable. I went back upstairs. The dog cried and barked for another 30 minutes before finally going quiet. I gave him a treat. We went to sleep. In the morning, I went back downstairs. The smell was completely gone. No trace of it at all. And the dog, that same dog who had refused to set a single paw past that doorframe for 2 nights, walked right down into the basement like it was nothing. Tail wagging. Happy. I stood there staring at him, completely speechless. Steve got home around 1 a.m. on Sunday. His dog went absolutely crazy with joy. After his wife took the dog outside, Steve and I sat down and I told him everything. I expected him to laugh, maybe tease me a little. He didn't laugh. He didn't even smile. He got quiet. Then he looked down and said that when the dog was a puppy, he used to have these same barking fits, always at that same basement door. They never figured out why. Then one day, it just stopped. He hadn't thought about it in years.
I could tell Steve was shaken. More shaken than I was, honestly. We talked about it for a while, but eventually, I just kept telling him it was probably nothing. Some animal. Some weird cold air draft. Some explanation we hadn't found yet. It's been 2 weeks. I cannot stop thinking about it. I've tried to piece it together. I've looked for explanations. But every time I think I'm close to something logical, some detail doesn't fit, and the whole thing falls apart. I don't know what was in that basement, but that dog did. This happened a few years ago. I had just gotten out of a long relationship and moved into a new apartment. Fresh start, new place, new chapter. The complex was beautiful, quiet, well kept, really lovely. I made friends with my neighbors quickly. It felt like a safe little community. My apartment was on the ground floor. The windows faced a quiet courtyard, which was peaceful during the day. At night, though, it meant anyone could walk right up to my window from outside. That crossed my mind when I first moved in, but in a building like that, surrounded by good neighbors, I pushed the thought away. A few months in, I started hearing things. The first time, I was getting ready for bed when I heard what sounded like running in the hallway outside my door. I looked through the peephole. Nothing there. No kids lived in my building, so it was strange, but I let it go.
A few nights later, it happened again. And then again. Then one night, I woke up to giggling outside my bedroom window. I wasn't scared. I was more annoyed. I figured it was some kids being stupid.
I tapped the glass hard and made a loud shushing sound. The giggling stopped for just a second. And then something tapped back. That made my heart jump. But I wasn't about to let some kids get the satisfaction of scaring me. I grabbed the curtain and yanked it open. No one was there. Just the quiet, empty courtyard. I stood there for a moment, genuinely confused. Even if kids had been right there, I don't know how they could have disappeared that fast. I closed the curtain and went back to sleep. The giggling came back over the next few nights. I did what I always do when someone wants a reaction from me. I ignored it. If I didn't react, they'd get bored and move on. At least, that was the plan. Then, I got an email from the apartment manager. She said it was urgent and asked me to come to the main office after work. All day I worried it was about rent or some kind of complaint. When I arrived, she told me to lock the door behind me. She was speaking in a near whisper. A security guard came in and sat beside me. She pulled up footage from the hallway camera. Around 2 a.m, 2 small hooded figures walked up to my apartment door. They were about the size of 10 or 12-year-old children. They stood there, facing the door, and didn't move. She fast-forwarded the footage. They still didn't move. For almost 10 full minutes, they just stood there, inches from my door. Then, before walking away, one of them reached out and tried the doorknob. You could clearly see them jiggling it. Once, twice, 3 times. The door held. Then they actually skipped out of the camera's view. The security team tried to track them on other cameras throughout the complex. They couldn't find them on a single one. We called the police. They took a statement, told me to call if anything else happened, and that was that. The next night, I decided to stay up and catch them. I wasn't going to be a victim. I sat awake and waited. Nothing. Silence. No giggling, no footsteps. I actually started to relax. Then, about a week later, around 1:30 in the morning, I heard my doorknob rattle. I muted the TV. My whole body went still. The rattling was real. I ran to the door and yelled for them to get away from my apartment. I heard laughing. A child's laugh, thin and high, and then a soft voice whispered through the door. "Mom, we're home. Just open the door and let us in." I didn't move. I didn't speak. I pressed my eye to the peephole and saw 2 small figures standing with their heads down. The voice came again. "Please let us in. We're home now. Please." That last word, please, it was desperate, like they were begging. Something about it made my skin crawl in a way I still can't explain. I finally found my voice and told them their mother didn't live here anymore, and that I was calling the police. They giggled again, both of them, together.
Then the doorknob started shaking violently. One of them threw their body into the door. It didn't budge. I pressed my back against it and held on. Then it stopped. I waited. I looked through the peephole again. The hallway was empty. I called the police. They said it was probably local kids pranking me. I didn't argue. It was the most logical explanation. But a few days later, the apartment manager pulled me aside in the parking lot. She asked if anything else had happened. I told her I thought it was just kids. She shook her head slowly and said she wasn't so sure. She told me that the woman who lived in my apartment before me was troubled. She wouldn't give me details. Privacy reasons, she said.
but she told me she believed something horrible had happened involving that woman's children. She didn't explain. She just left it at that. She turned to walk away, then stopped and looked back at me. "This wasn't a prank," she said. And then she was gone. I never saw those children at my door again. But here's the thing that keeps me up at night. Even now, years later, living somewhere completely different, there were no children in my building. The building required a key to get in. Security couldn't find them on any other camera in the entire complex. So where did they come from? And where did they go? I still don't believe in ghosts, but I cannot explain what happened. And the more time passes, the harder it gets to convince myself it was just some kids playing a prank. That desperate little please is something I will never forget.
This happened about 10 years ago. I've mostly stopped telling people because most of them think I'm lying. But my wife pushed me to write it down. She said maybe someone out there has been through something similar. So here it is. I was working a dead-end retail job at the time. Nothing exciting, nothing glamorous, just a way to keep the lights on. One afternoon, when I walked to my car after a shift, I noticed something stuck to the door handle. A neon pink sticky note. It said, "You're special, and I hope you have an amazing day." There was a smiley face sticker on it. I smiled. It was a nice little surprise. I figured one of my coworkers was being sweet and didn't think much about it. The next few days, I found more notes in the same spot. Each one was friendly and kind. After a few of them, I decided to leave one back. I wrote something warm, maybe a little flirtatious, and stuck it to my own door before heading into work. When I came out that afternoon, there was a new note waiting. They flirted right back. I don't know why I kept going. Part of me thought it was a joke. Part of me was genuinely touched by it. Either way, we kept passing notes back and forth for days, like a strange little game. Then I had a day off. On my way out the door that morning, I found a pink note on my car at home. It said, "You look cute when you're sleeping." I stood there in my driveway, very still. This person knew where I lived, and they had been watching me sleep. I told myself it had to be someone I worked with, someone who knew my address and was taking the prank too far. That was the only explanation that made sense. I crumpled the note and threw it away.
Back at work, the notes continued, but something had shifted. The friendly messages started getting darker. After a few days of me not responding, one of the notes read, "You better answer me. Remember, I know where you live." That was when I started feeling genuinely scared. I left a note of my own the next morning, telling whoever this was to leave me alone, or I would call the police. When I came out after my shift, my note was gone. And for the first time, there was no new note waiting for me. I felt relieved. I thought it was over. That night, I woke up to a sound. I lay in bed listening. It was faint. Shuffling, maybe? Or just the house settling. I tried to convince myself it was nothing, but my heart was pounding. I couldn't just lie there. I grabbed a baseball bat from the closet. I walked slowly down the hallway toward the living room. Every step felt like a countdown. When I reached the end of the hall and could see the living room, dining room, and kitchen all at once, I stopped. I turned on the lights. I scanned the room. I saw nothing. No one. I stood there for a full minute, listening. Nothing. I turned off the lights and walked quickly back to my room. I locked the door, turned on the TV,
and eventually fell asleep. When I woke up the next morning, I walked to the fridge to grab some juice. There was a bright pink sticky note stuck to the door.
You can't keep me away. I froze. For about 30 seconds, I couldn't move. Then I ran through the entire house, checking every door and every window. All locked. Every single one. Nobody had a key to my house. My family lived out of state. I wasn't close enough to anyone locally to trust them with a key. There was absolutely no way someone should have been able to get inside. I called the police. They investigated but couldn't find anything useful. They checked the parking lot cameras at my work, but my spot was on the side of the building where the cameras didn't reach. Their conclusion? It had to be someone who knew me. But that note on the fridge told a different story. I stayed at a friend's house for a few nights. When I finally went back home, we replaced every single lock on every door. That first night back, my friend stayed over. Nothing happened. Weeks passed, then months. No more notes at work. Nothing at home. I started to breathe again. Then 2.5 months later, I walked out my front door one morning and found one of those horrible pink notes stuck right to the outside. I guess you don't want to play anymore. I called the police immediately. Then I bought cameras and had them installed everywhere. After that, nothing. The notes stopped for good. But I think about that night constantly. The night I heard something in my house. The night I walked down that hallway with a bat and stood at the edge of the living room convinced I was alone. What if I wasn't? What if someone was hiding behind the couch, in a corner, just feet away from where I was standing, watching me scan the room? A friend of mine once told me that when I went back to my bedroom and locked the door, that might have been what saved my life. That whoever was in my house couldn't get through that locked door and eventually left. I don't know if that's true. I'll never know. What I do know is this. I changed those locks. And whatever this person wanted from me, they never got it. It's been 10 years. I've moved. I'm married now. Life is good. But every time I see a neon pink sticky note, my stomach drops.
Just for a second. Just enough to remind me that something very wrong happened to me once, and I still don't fully understand what it was. I'm just glad I'm here to tell you about it.